Welcome back, fellow travelers, on this spinning ball of entropy. Welcome to the Existential Nerd's Guide to Everything. I'm your host, Maple, and I hope you're ready to talk about the geopolitical equivalent of a midlife crisis. Remember the early 2000s? We were also sure of two things. One, the Segway was going to replace walking, and two, China was an unstoppable economic juggernaut that would eventually own every square inch of the planet.
For 2 decades, we checked under our beds for the rise of the dragon, convinced that by now we'd all be reporting to a centrally planned committee just to buy a toaster. While it's today, I still have to walk to the kitchen, and that dragon, it's currently sitting on a pile of empty apartment buildings looking at its demographic chart and wondering where all the babies went. So what if we were looking in the wrong direction? Today we're exploring why a stagnant, collapsing China could be far more dangerous than a rising one.
For decades, China's growth was basically a cheat code. They were building like crazy. It was a miracle. It was unprecedented. And now, that era has officially left the building. It's been replaced by what experts are calling internal decay. So today we're going to break down the 4 big reasons why: a demographic time bomb, a mind-boggling property collapse, a generation that's just given up, and why all of this makes for a much, much more dangerous world. Okay, let's start with the mother of all problems, the one that underpins everything else. This isn't just some theory. It's cold, hard, biological math. The human engine of the Chinese miracle is breaking down, and it's revealing a crack that goes right to the foundation. This right here, this is the sound of a demographic pyramid flipping completely upside down. This one little ratio, 4 to 2 to 1, is the direct mathematical consequence of the infamous one-child policy. It's brutal in its simplicity.
So just imagine this for a second. You're a young person in Shanghai. You are the only financial and social safety net for 6 elderly people. That's 2 parents and 4 grandparents. You've got no brothers, no sisters to help share the load. It's all on you. And this wasn't a bug in the system. It was a feature designed 40 years ago, and biology is now collecting that debt with interest. And this just shows you the sheer scale of the problem. China's population is now shrinking for the first time since the Great Famine in 1961. And look at this. They're on track to lose a workforce the size of Brazil's entire population by 2050. The birth rate is in free fall. And on top of that, a cultural preference for boys has created 35 million bare branches, a huge group of men with little hope of ever starting a family, which is, a classic recipe for social instability.
Now, you'll hear people compare this to Japan's lost decades, but this chart shows you why that's a terrible comparison. It's the critical difference. Japan was already a rich, developed nation when its population started to age. China, on the other hand, is getting old before it gets rich. Their GDP per person is about where the U.S. was back in 1980, and their state pension fund, well, it's on track to run completely dry by 2035. You just can't build a prosperous future when your country is turning into the world's largest nursing home.
So let's move on to the economy. Because if the demographics are a slow-motion car crash, then the property market is the sudden, fiery explosion. For 20 years, housing was China's national religion. The deal was simple. The party stays in power, and the value of your apartment always goes up. Well, that deal is now broken. This quote from one of our sources just nails it. The business model was basically a Ponzi scheme. Developers would take a family's entire life savings for an apartment that hadn't even been built yet, then use that cash to buy more land and just start the whole cycle all over again. It worked like a charm, until, suddenly, it didn't. At its absolute peak, the total value of China's real estate market was an estimated $52 trillion. Let me put that in perspective for you. That is more than the entire U.S. stock market. An absolutely staggering number, all built on a foundation of debt and pure speculation.
And here's the completely absurd reality of that $52 trillion number. There are so many empty, unfinished apartments that you could literally house the entire population of France in them with room to spare. These are the infamous ghost cities, just miles and miles of empty high-rises where the only residents are wind and dust. And this is precisely why it's an existential crisis for the Communist Party. In the US, maybe 30% of a family's wealth is in their house. In China, it's 70%. So by letting this bubble pop, the government didn't just trigger an economic crisis, they vaporized the retirement savings of an entire generation. They broke their core promise of prosperity. And now the confidence is just gone.
So if the real estate crisis is the hardware failure, this next part is the software crash. It's the psychological rebellion of China's youth. And honestly, this is the thing that terrifies the state more than any economic number.
It's like trying to run Cyberpunk 2077 on a Commodore 64. It looks cool for a second, then everything starts smoking.
So, first you have to understand this concept, involution. Imagine you're in a packed movie theater, and the person in front of you stands up to get a better view. So, naturally, you have to stand up too. And then the person behind you. Pretty soon, everybody is standing. No one can see any better than before. But now, everyone is completely exhausted. That, right there, is the modern Chinese workplace for millions of young people.
So, when you're faced with that kind of pointless exhaustion, what do you do? Well, many have chosen to just lie flat. And this isn't about being lazy. It's a quiet, massive protest. It's a very conscious choice to just stop striving, stop buying stuff, and stop playing a game that feels completely rigged. It's a rebellion, just a really, really passive one.
But then, it gets even darker. Lying flat can spiral into letting it rot, and this is just total nihilistic surrender. The term actually comes from basketball. You know, when a team is losing so badly in the last 2 minutes, they just let the clock run out. They call it garbage time. This is a generation looking at their future and deciding, yeah, we're already in garbage time.
And I mean, can you really blame them? The official youth unemployment rate shot up past 21%. But one academic estimated the real number, if you count all the people who've just given up looking, is closer to 46.5%. Nearly half. And the government's brilliant response? They didn't fix the problem, they just stopped publishing the data for a while. Now, before we get into what happens when this wounded giant starts looking for trouble, let's talk about your social credit score. If you enjoy this analysis, subscribing is the only way to ensure your digital standing remains exemplary. Leave a review. Tell the world that my sarcasm is a vital strategic resource. If you don't, I'll just have to assume you've moved to a ghost city in Inner Mongolia and can no longer access the open internet. So, subscribe now. It's the only centrally planned decision you'll make today that actually feels good.
Okay, this brings us to the most dangerous part of our story. Because a stagnant China isn't a safer China. It's a much more unpredictable one. When a government can't give its people prosperity anymore, it starts looking for a new reason to exist. And that reason usually involves a lot of flags, drums, and pointing at enemies on a map. This is where all that internal decay becomes a huge global threat.
History actually has a terrifying name for this exact situation: the peaking power trap. It's when a nation sees its best days in the rearview mirror and becomes dangerously aggressive. Think about Germany in 1914. It saw Russia rising and decided it had to fight now before it was too late. Or Japan in 1941 getting choked by an oil embargo, making a desperate gamble at Pearl Harbor. So the big question now is, does China look at its own problems and see its window to seize Taiwan closing forever?
And that leads us straight to the nightmare scenario. With a failing economy at home and a whole generation lying flat, the CCP desperately needs a distraction. A manufactured crisis over Taiwan could be the ultimate dog-ate-my-economic miracle excuse. A huge dose of nationalism to make 1.4 billion people forget about their problems.
And let's be crystal clear, this is not just some regional issue. Taiwan is the absolute linchpin of the global economy. It produces over 90% of the world's most advanced computer chips. If those factories stop, the global economy stops. Instantly. No new iPhones, no new cars, no new medical devices. We are talking about a worldwide depression that would make the Great Depression of 1929 look like a mild recession.
So that leaves us with the central dilemma of our time, doesn't it? We're all tied to this wounded giant. If it collapses, the shockwaves could take us all down with it. But if its leaders feel cornered, they could lash out and start a catastrophic war. So how do you contain a superpower in decline without pushing it over the edge? There are no easy answers. This episode was produced by the one and only FireflyHaku. In a world of economic volatility and internal decay, FireflyHaku is the only asset that is consistently up and to the right. They are the stability in my stagnation. Thank you, FireflyHaku, for not letting this show lie flat. And thank you all for listening. Happy holidays to you and yours. May your growth be sustainable, your demographics be youthful, and your property investments be, well, actually real. Stay nerdy. Goodbye.